As promised in part 1, I'm going to be jumping ahead to 1980 and see what advancements in the racing genre had been made by that point. We'll start off with yet another Atari 2600 game, this time Night Driver. Okay, so technically this was a port of an arcade game that was released back in 1976, but it's still pretty impressive to see running on the VCS. I mean, the car looks very Atari, but in fairness, the arcade game used a screen overlay to display the front of the car, so it wasn't having to render anything but the road or obstacles. Your goal in Night Driver is to drive as far down a twisty and variable width road as you can in 90 seconds, as indicated by the timer in the top right corner of the screen. The further you drive, the more points you get. You can also set some of the modes to infinite time. Here, your score keeps going up, but there's no fail state that you can achieve. I'm not sure what the point of that is. The arcade game had a full steering wheel and pedal for controlling your car, but of course that's not really an option on the VCS. Instead, the game makes use of the paddle controller. You use the button to accelerate, let off the button to brake, and of course use the knob to steer. This control setup works pretty well for the most part, with only one real issue that I'll get to in a moment. Hitting the white pylons on either side of the road results in a crash. There's no real penalty for this, but it does mean losing time, and therefore points. There are also occasional cars that'll be traveling in the other direction, and running into them will make, as the instruction manual says, a simulated crash scene appear on your screen. Quite the simulation. Once again, this only acts as a means of slowing you down from achieving a high score. There are 3 separate tracks you can race on, ranging from easy to basically impossible. I was certainly not ready to spend the time trying to master the expert level course, though I'd imagine that would have provided a good bit of replay value back in the day. Once you get started, it's easy to slip into a flow state and lose track of your surroundings as those pylons start to become your new reality. That is, until you crash. And this is where that aforementioned issue arises. While I do usually love the paddle controllers, there is one issue with their implementation in this specific use case. Namely, the fact that the paddle knobs don't have any kind of spring-based position reset, or give you any kind of visual indicator to let you know what's considered its centered position. In other words, hitting a wall stops all movement, and you have no real concept of which direction your car's wheels were facing. Pair this with your acceleration being completely binary, and this lethal combo typically ends with you smashing back into the same wall again, or oversteering into the wall on the other side.
Once again, now I'm turned all the way to the left, but I keep hitting the gas and can't turn anymore. Like, let me just hit the gas, and it's like, no, pylon.
I think it was a tree you hit that time.
Oh, jeez, okay.
Simulated crash?
Okay, let's turn back this direction.
Yeah, but then you end up going to the opposite. It gives it a feel like there's magnets on the wall sometimes.
And yeah, you can really trap yourself in unavoidable positions. So I was like, if I just slow down, I could just react to it. It's like, a lot of it depends on where you're at on the track.
Like that, it didn't look like you were going to hit that yet.
Yeah, it did not look like I was going to hit it. Actually, that's probably the optimal way. Yeah, because it makes you move left and right depending on how much this is turned. So it's almost like you have to stop, like, recenter yourself. Figure out where you're at. It's like, okay, now I need to go this way. Let me stop and center myself back that direction. As it stands, my experiences with Night Driver are always mixed. There's something addictive and satisfying about managing to flawlessly nail a series of tight curves, but that's all brought to an abrupt halt the moment that you hit something and begin fumbling around and bouncing from wall to wall like a pinball. Then, once you do get back on track, you're right back into the game's highs. The only other negative I have with it is the scoring. As I've mentioned in previous videos, combining a time limit with only a single method of scoring points means that there's kind of a ceiling on the high scores that you can achieve. Like, if you have the button held down the entire minute and a half and manage to not hit a wall, that's the highest score possible. It's not a big deal, and I would imagine it would probably take a good bit of time to get to that point, especially on those more difficult track layouts, but it really feels like a design relic from a past era. I mean, considering this was based on a 1976 game, I guess that makes sense. Even taking those elements into account, Night Driver can still be pretty fun for a few rounds. Similar to Indy 500, it's definitely something of a novel experience today due to its use of Atari's very unique controllers. Alright, but enough about Atari. In 1980, Mattel had just released a brand new console, the Intellivision, which of course needed its own racing game. Introducing Auto Racing for the Intellivision. Huh. The title sounds like something from the 1930s.
Upon getting past the title screen, you're greeted with a menu asking you to select a course and a car. Honestly, having played so many old games from this era recently, it's kind of crazy to see a menu pop up like this instead of just throwing you headfirst into the game.
It's like, are you selecting...
Is that how many players or what kind of car you're driving?
Yeah, that's what I was wondering, the same thing.
Playing all these like Atari games, I'm not used to having a car select. There are 5 tracks in total, and pressing 1 through 5 on the numerical keypad will choose the corresponding course. There are also 5 cars to pick from, and each one has different stats. Now, this is still an old game, so of course nothing in-game tells you about these stats, and I don't have the manual, so Zayden and I just picked cars based solely on color. After making your selections, you're off to the races.
You hit enter and it goes, okay.
Oh, here we go.
Okay, and it steers somehow. Oh, I crashed. I shouldn't have tried to steer right away, I guess. I was like, let me steer. So how do we restart? Okay, there we go. Now I gotta be careful of... Okay, so I don't have to hit acceleration. Wait a minute.
How do you steer?
Feel like... Yeah, I was like, wait a minute, I'm not hitting anything. I'm like, does this thing spin, or...
That's the brakes. What's happening?
Yeah, hit the brake. I chose blue, right?
Yeah. Oh no, our first curve. I hit a tree. Oh gosh. This again? Another Intellivision game with a weird and overcomplicated control scheme that I get the pleasure of explaining. Okay, let's start off with the basics. Since the Intellivision controllers have 2 action buttons, you'd probably assume that one of them would be used for acceleration, right? Well, you'd be wrong then, because your car actually moves forward automatically. In this case, the top button is for braking, and the bottom button goes unused. I mean, I guess I should be thankful that you don't have to keep those tiny, sharp buttons depressed for most of the race, though with how much braking you'll be doing, your thumb and/or fingers will still receive plenty of discomfort by the end of the race, or more accurately, the first couple minutes. And that just leaves steering to explain. Since the game is played from an overhead view, you might be expecting to just push the directional disc in whatever direction you want to go, but you'd be wrong once again. The game implements an almost tank controls plus approach to steering, with left and right always making your car steer left and right. So yes, that means you have to steer left to go right and right to go left if your car is facing downwards. Really great then that all but the last and most difficult track start with your cars moving in a horizontal direction where pushing left will cause your car to steer upwards. Ah, but it gets worse. If you don't want to steer sharply to the left or right, you need to hold diagonally up in either left or right to steer more gradually in your chosen direction. If you need to steer even harder, the entire lower third of the disc is dedicated to what the manual refers to as the oversteer area. Oversteering is mandatory to make most of the turns in the game, unless you know the tracks well enough to start steering into them early. The only thing is, your cars are very prone to sliding out any time you move into the oversteering area, especially when you're generally braking at the same time. It leads to a near constant feeling of uncontrollability that's, quite frankly, as difficult to describe as it is unique. Seriously, I've played literally thousands of games in my time, and I can't think of a single one of them to compare this to. You've truly outdone yourselves this time, Mattel. Oh, I feel so out of control.
Yeah, you go really fast.
Or rather, you just steer so slowly that it feels like you're going really fast.
Oh, true.
What happened there? Beyond the controls, there's also another major oddity to mention. Specifically, the wind conditions. It's a racing game, right? First to the finish wins. It seems like a pretty universal concept, though one that's completely lacking here in auto racing. Playing solo, not pictured here, is a standard 5-lap time trial mode with a timer in place to keep track of your best times. Not bad, but the game's title promised me autos that race, so that's what I want to be playing, dang it. The 2-player mode is the main attraction then, though the big problem is that due to a lack of any kind of split screen, and the game's zoomed-in perspective, both players' cars have to be on screen at any given time. The programmer's solution to this dilemma was to introduce a point system. The first player to reach 50 points is the winner, and you can technically race for as many laps as is required for somebody to achieve that. How do you score points then? Well, you get 1 point anytime you start to pull away and hit the edge of the screen, and 2 points anytime the other player crashes into one of the many off-track objects, including shrubs, that litter both sides of the track. Seriously, what city would allow residential housing this close to a freaking racetrack? The zoning laws in Intellicity or whatever must be wild.
Okay, am I going to be able to get out of this? No, I'm going to hit that tree. I don't think there's any way around it. I'm tapping the brakes to let myself scoot forward just...
Almost.
For nothing.
I'm trying to not bump you out, though. Okay, I think we're both... Come on, there's no way I'm going to hit that tree. Right? No. I was like, I was so far.
The point system itself is already weird and very loose with the definition of racing, but the checkpoint resets push it firmly into game design sin territory. Every time one of the aforementioned point-scoring events occurs, the game puts the two of you back to the last invisible checkpoint that you passed. I can't think of any other instance of resetting progress being used as a positive, mainly because losing progress is not a positive experience. Ever. As a result, pulling ahead and doing well is rewarded with having to repeat the same section of track again, and your opponent's failure to stay on the track, which is already harder than it should be, leads to both players being punished.
Yeah, it's such a bizarre way to have a racing game. Like, that to cut the action as soon as someone gets too far ahead. Be like, oh, slow down there, guys. You guys are doing too good.
I realize this was released in the Wild West era of game design, but this feels so far from the most basic of sensibilities that it makes me wonder if this whole game was a casualty of Mattel's push for clear graphic superiority over Atari above all else. In that case, I'd say they definitely hit that goal, as auto racing is one of the best looking home console games at the time, but that's about the most positive thing I can say about it. Oh, and I'd be remiss if I didn't bring up the awful screeching tire sound effect that they chose for braking. Play for a couple of rounds and you'll hear that sound so often it'll start to haunt your dreams. Truthfully, I don't like being this negative about early games like this. There are plenty of other YouTubers out there that have the retro game related rants covered, and I really do try and find at least some positives in there, but I'm also not going to fake positivity. Given that what you do in this game hardly qualifies as racing, I think this might actually be, objectively, the worst racing game I've ever played. Congrats, Mattel, you made me do this.
Yeah, that was a lap.
We did a lap.
I'm going to say we beat the game.
Yeah, it feels like it. We successfully beat a lap. Oh, man.
Run into a building. Crash.
By 1982, Namco's pole position would be released in arcades, and its popularity would lead to a fundamental shift in how racing games were made. The behind-the-car viewpoint and its use of parallax scrolling to create a pseudo 3D track became industry standard. Racing games like these, then, feel like they exist somewhere in the awkward period between the old Grand Track 10 style racers and the newer post-pole position ones. Night Driver is definitely an interesting game that might be worth checking out if you're already into gaming history, but I'd say you should probably pass on auto racing entirely.